If you're here, there's a good chance your heart still hurts. Maybe it's been weeks, months, maybe even years. You've read the quotes, listened to the breakup songs, maybe even tried dating again. But deep down, something still lingers. That that question, why am I not over this yet? I'm not here to sugarcoat it. I'm here to shake something loose in you. Because I believe that if you're still heartbroken, it's not because you're weak. It's because no one ever showed you how to actually move through heartbreak and come out stronger. What you're going to hear today won't be just comforting. It'll be confronting. And that's a good thing, because you don't need more glitches. You need a shift. And I promise, if you're open, this will change everything. Closure is one of the most misunderstood parts of heartbreak. We're taught to believe that in order to move on, we need some kind of final conversation, a clear explanation, an apology, some magical moment where the other person finally validates our pain and gives us peace. But waiting for that kind of closure is like waiting for a storm to apologize after it's passed. It's not coming. And more importantly, it's not necessary. The truth is, every time you convince yourself that you need something from them to heal, you give away your power. You let your past dictate your future. And often, the very person who hurt you is the one you're relying on to help you heal. That's like asking someone who dropped you to catch you again. The reason this keeps you stuck is because closure isn't about them. It's about you. It's about making a decision to stop looking back and start taking ownership of your story. You don't need a conversation to get closure. Your absence, you don't need them to explain when they pulled away. You don't need to know when they chose someone else. And you definitely don't need to hear, "I'm sorry," to decide that you deserve peace. What you need is a moment of clarity where you say to yourself, "I don't need their permission to move on." That moment is the beginning of your real closure. Think about it. How many people finally got the conversation they thought they needed, only to walk away feeling even more confused, hurt, or angry? Closure from someone else rarely gives you peace, because their truth won't always match yours. And if they're not emotionally honest or self-aware, you're not going to get anything that satisfies your longing for answers. You'll just keep circling back, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense to begin with. And if you're holding on to hope that they'll come back just to explain what happened, it's not really closure you're waiting for. It's reconciliation. That's where we need to be brutally honest with ourselves. Sometimes we chase closure because deep down we want to reopen the door. We want to see if there's still a chance. But that kind of hope becomes a trap. It keeps you emotionally tethered to someone who's already moved on. It keeps you analyzing their texts, their social media, their silence. It turns you into an investigator of a past that no longer exists. Instead, what if you became the author of your own closure? What if you took everything you needed from the situation? Not from them, but from within yourself. You can look back and say, "That wasn't love the way I needed it." Or, "They weren't capable of showing up for me." Or even just, "This ended because I'm meant for something more aligned." Closure doesn't mean you forget them. It doesn't mean the memories stop showing up. It means you no longer need answers to give yourself permission to move forward. You can close a chapter without their cooperation. You can grieve and let go at the same time. You can decide today that the story continues, with or without their final words. Because in the end, healing isn't about getting their version of the story. It's about rewriting yours on your terms. And once you do that, the past no longer holds the pen. You do. Heartbreak hurts. There's no way around that. When something we cared about ends, especially a relationship where we gave our time, our love, our vulnerability, it leaves behind a real sense of loss. And grieving that loss is not just natural, it's necessary. The mistake many people make, though, is confusing grieving with staying stuck. And there's a fine line between the two. Grieving with intention means allowing yourself to feel the sadness, the anger, the loneliness. without letting those emotions define your identity. It means facing the pain, but not feeding it. You have to give yourself permission to cry, to miss them, to feel lost. But at the same time, you need to stay conscious of how you're moving through that pain. Are you processing it? Or are you marinating in it? Because when we indulge in heartbreak, we don't heal. We stay in a loop of emotional self-sabotage, convincing ourselves that staying broken somehow honors the love we lost. There's a part of us that becomes addicted to the sorrow. We replay old conversations. We scroll through their photos. We listen to that one song that takes us straight back to the moment it all fell apart. And maybe part of us believes that by staying in that space, we're keeping the connection alive. But the truth is, every time we do that, we reopen the wound. We're not grieving, we're reliving. And that doesn't move us forward. It just makes the pain our home. And grieving with intention requires boundaries, emotional boundaries with yourself. You have to say, I'm going to feel this, but I'm not going to wallow in it. That means limiting how much time you spend replaying the relationship in your mind. It means not texting your ex under the excuse of just checking in. It means putting your energy into something, even something small. That creates momentum, because healing doesn't come from reflection alone. It comes from movement. You also need to separate grief from guilt. A lot of people beat themselves up during heartbreak. They say, if I'd done this differently, maybe they'd still be here. Or, I pushed them away. Or, I wasn't enough. But self-blame doesn't help you grow. It just traps you in shame, and you can't rebuild your self-worth while tearing yourself down. Grieving intentionally means acknowledging what you learned without turning yourself into the villain of your own story. Another trap people fall into is romanticizing the past. When we're heartbroken, our mind has a way of editing the story, highlighting only the beautiful parts and conveniently forgetting the things that actually made the relationship painful or unsustainable. It's easy to remember the good mornings, the laughs, the way they looked at you. But what about the confusion, the emotional distance, the parts of you that felt unseen or unappreciated? If you only grieve the highlight reel, you'll stay attached to a version of the relationship that wasn't even real. This is where intention comes in. You need to remind yourself of the whole picture. You need to write it down if you have to. Every time your brain says, I miss them, respond with, I miss the idea of them, but the reality was costing me peace. The goal of grieving isn't to forget them. It's to remember yourself, the version of you that maybe got lost while trying to hold on to something that wasn't holding you back. So yes, grieve. Let the tears come when they need to. Sit with your heartache when it shows up. But don't let that become your identity. Don't wear your pain like a badge of honor. Because there's life after heartbreak. And the more intentionally you grieve, the way your absence, the faster you'll see the end of a relationship doesn't have to be the end of your joy. It can be the beginning of something far deeper, your relationship with yourself. Heartbreak has a way of hijacking your thoughts, even when you're doing everyday things. Brushing your teeth, walking to work, lying in bed at night, their face, their voice, their memory slips in. And slowly, almost without noticing, you start giving away your mental and emotional energy to someone who isn't even in your life anymore. Every time you replay that last conversation, every time you wonder if they miss you, every time you stalk their Instagram or read your old messages, you're leaking energy. Energy that could be going into healing, into growth, into rebuilding your life, is instead being siphoned off by a ghost. We underestimate how powerful our attention, what you focus on, expands. So if you're constantly thinking about them, you're not just remembering, you're reinforcing the emotional attachment. Your mind is still building a connection to someone who's no longer building anything with you. And the more you give them that space, the less space there is for you to process, to reset, and to move forward. It's like having 100 tabs open in your brain, and they're all stuck on one person. No wonder you feel drained. One of the most important steps in healing is reclaiming that energy. And that doesn't mean you need to hate them or pretend the relationship didn't mean anything. It just means recognizing that your time, your focus, your emotions, they're valuable. And right now, they're being invested in something that is no longer giving you a return. It's emotional debt, and it grows every time you hand over your thoughts to a person who's no longer here. Reclaiming your energy starts with boundaries. Not just with them, but with yourself. Stop checking their page. Stop reading old messages hoping they'll feel different today. Stop reimagining every moment, trying to find the one thing you could have said differently. You don't need to block them out of spite. You need to block them to protect your peace. The world tells you that's dramatic. It's not. It's discipline. You're not trying to punish them. You're trying to free yourself. It also means being intentional about your energy goes instead. Start pouring it into the things that make you feel grounded. Reconnect with friends who remind you who you are. Pick up a project that requires your full attention. Go to the gym, not just to look better, but to feel stronger. This isn't about distraction. It's about direction. You're not running from the pain. You're choosing to place your energy where it builds you, not breaks you. And yes, there will be moments when you slip. When you hear a song, or smell their cologne, or walk past that place you used to go together. And for a second, your mind will try to drag you back. That's okay. But instead of going down the spiral, pause and say, not today. That one small act of awareness, that one decision, shifts your energy back to you. You have to remember that your thoughts are not just passive memories. They're fuel. They shape how you feel, how you show up, and what you attract next. And if your mind is still filled with someone who couldn't give you what you needed, there's no room for someone who can. This is about making space, emotional space, mental space, so you can start building a life where your peace isn't dependent on someone else's presence, and your energy isn't wasted on someone who already let go. You don't have to stop missing them overnight. That's not realistic. But every time you choose yourself instead of the story in your head, every time you redirect your focus, you're taking back power. You're calling your energy home. And that's how healing begins. Not all at once, but in quiet, consistent choices to give your attention to something that truly deserves it you. Most people think healing from heartbreak just means getting back to normal. Like once the crying stops and the memories fade, you're healed. But real healing isn't about returning to who you were before the relationship. It's about becoming someone who doesn't break the same way again. Someone who's stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Heartbreak can either break you down or break you open. And if you're intentional about it, you can use it to grow in ways you never would have if the relationship had worked out. It's not just about getting over someone. It's about upgrading yourself. That means looking at where you gave away your power, where you tolerated less than you deserved, where you lost yourself trying to be enough for someone who couldn't meet you, and then deciding that the next version of you is going to show up differently, more grounded, more discerning, more aligned with your worth. This doesn't mean you have to suddenly become this perfect version of yourself, but it does mean taking what you've been through and turning it into fuel. Ask yourself, what did this relationship teach me about what I want and what I'll never settle for again? Let the pain sharpen your clarity, not cloud it. Most people come out of heartbreak jaded or bitter, but that's only because they never used the experience to grow. They just tried to numb it, avoid it, or rush through it. But when you really sit with it, when you actually feel it, you can extract the lesson. And that's where the upgrade starts. Maybe this means taking your physical health seriously. Maybe it's starting that side project you kept putting off. Maybe it's finally setting boundaries with people who drain you. Or maybe it's just learning to enjoy your own company again, to fall back in love with the person in the mirror. All of that is part of the upgrade. Every small step you take away from the version of you that begged to be chosen, and toward the version of you that chooses herself first, is part of the healing. This is also where you stop tying your identity to the relationship. You're not someone who got left, or cheated on, or ghosted. You're someone who experienced something painful and decided to rise anyway. And that identity is powerful, because when you become someone who no longer needs external validation to feel enough, the whole game changes. You stop chasing. You stop performing. You start attracting relationships that mirror the self-worth you've built, not the insecurities you're trying to hide. But none of this happens by accident. You have to be deliberate every time you feel like slipping back into old patterns. Texting them, stalking their profile, convincing yourself it wasn't that bad. You have to remember what you're building. That you're not just healing to feel better. You're healing to become better. And that requires discipline. That requires saying no to short-term comfort in favor of long-term strength. So yes, heartbreak hurts. But it also reveals. It shows you where you're abandoning yourself, where you settled, where you played small. And if you're willing to face those truths, you can use the pain to evolve. You can build a version of you that doesn't just survive the breakup, but becomes someone who could never again be broken in that same way. Not because you've hardened, but because you've upgraded. You've raised your standards. You've built something deeper inside of you. And that's what makes the next chapter of your life not just about moving on, but moving up. One of the biggest illusions heartbreak creates is the belief that you've lost something rare, something so unique and irreplaceable that you may never find it again. It feels like the love you had with that person was one of a kind, like no one else could possibly make you feel the same way. But more often than not, what you were experiencing wasn't love at its highest form. It was familiarity, attachment, or chemistry without compatibility. Real love isn't rare. It's everywhere. But what is rare is the ability to honor your self-respect, even when your heart wants to compromise it. When someone walks away, treats you poorly, sends mixed signals, or doesn't choose you fully, it's easy to romanticize the connection. You start focusing only on the good parts. How they made you laugh, how intense the physical chemistry was, how close you almost were to having the relationship you wanted. But if you really sit with it, if you allow yourself to see the whole picture, you'll realize something very different. You'll realize that what was truly rare wasn't the connection. It was your willingness to love, your loyalty, your emotional depth, your desire to build something real. And if someone couldn't meet you there, if they weren't able to handle that kind of depth or weren't ready to reciprocate that kind of energy, it's not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their capacity. But we tend to internalize rejection as something being wrong with us. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't what they wanted. When in truth, many times, they didn't even know what they wanted. Or they wanted the idea of you without responsibility of actually showing up for you. This is where self-respect comes in. Self-respect is the line you draw between what your heart feels and what your standards demand. It's the part of you that says, I may still love you, but I will not lower myself for you. That line is everything, because love without self-respect leads to chasing, to settling, to staying in situations where you're constantly proving your value rather than being appreciated for it. It leads to you abandoning yourself just to be accepted by someone else. There's a moment in every heartbreak where you have to choose, do or absence. Do I continue to see this person through the lens of what I hoped they'd become? Or do I accept them for who they really are? And walk away from what isn't aligned. That choice isn't easy. Your feelings will pull you in one direction. Your standards will pull you in another. But every time you choose self-respect over emotional fantasy, you reclaim a part of yourself that may have gotten lost in the relationship. You have to remind yourself, it's not about whether they loved you. It's about whether they loved you well. Did they make you feel safe, seen, valued, or were you constantly guessing where you stood, trying to earn affection, or explaining your worth to someone who should already known it? that's not love. That's emotional scarcity. And what you deserve is abundance. So no, you didn't lose the only person who could ever love you. You let go of the person who couldn't love you in the way you needed. There's a big difference. Love isn't scarce, but people who respect your heart, your time, your boundaries, those are the people you hold space for. And the way you attract that kind of love in the future is by refusing to settle for anything less now. Choosing self-respect might hurt in the short term, but in the long run, it saves you from the deeper pain of staying somewhere you were never truly seen. Heartbreak can feel like the end of everything, your plans, your identity, your sense of security. But what most people don't realize is that how you respond to heartbreak doesn't just affect your past. It shapes your future. Every decision you make in the aftermath of a breakup becomes the blueprint for your next relationship. The way you treat yourself now, the standards you set, the healing you commit to, it all determines what you will attract and allow next. It's easy to think that healing is just about feeling better or moving on, but it's so much more than that. It's about recalibrating your internal compass so you don't repeat the same patterns again. Because if you don't take time to reflect, grow, and re-establish what you actually need in a partner, you'll likely fall into the same dynamic, just with a different face. That's not healing. That's recycling pain. And pain that isn't transformed gets transferred. You're not just getting over someone. You're preparing for someone better. And that better person isn't just about their qualities. It's also about you being in a place where you're ready to receive and hold a healthier, deeper love. That means doing the uncomfortable work now, facing your insecurities, rebuilding your self-worth, learning how to be emotionally available with yourself before demanding it from someone else. People often say, I just keep ending up with the wrong people. But the truth is, you don't attract what you want. You attract what you believe you deserve. So if part of you still feels like love is supposed to be painful or inconsistent or conditional, you'll subconsciously be drawn to that same kind of dynamic again. That's why this moment, this space between who you lost and who you'll meet next, is so important. It's not a waiting room. It's training ground. It's where you sharpen your clarity and upgrade your standards, not out of fear or bitterness, but out of self-respect and experience. Every boundary you set now becomes part of your emotional armor. Every time you say no to an old pattern, you reinforce a new one. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you shift the kind of partner you're aligned to attract. And perhaps most importantly, every time you learn to give yourself the love, attention, and care you used to seek from someone else, you stop coming from a place of lack. You start relating from wholeness, not hunger. Think of it like this: your future relationship is watching what you're doing right now. Not literally, of course, but energetically. The person who is going to love you in the way you've always wanted needs you to become the version of yourself who can not only recognize that love, but receive it and hold it and reciprocate it. Because healthy love requires emotional maturity. It requires a healed heart, and that can only come from doing the internal work. Not from time alone, not from jumping into something new, and definitely not from trying to fill the void someone else left. This phase isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's where you reclaim your standards, clarify your vision, and commit to never shrinking yourself again for someone who couldn't meet you where you are. The heartbreak may have slowed you down, but it doesn't have to define you. What defines you is how you rise from it, how you treat yourself when no one else is watching, how you stop chasing love and start becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts it. Because one day, you'll meet someone who makes you grateful it didn't work out with anyone else. And when that day comes, you'll realize that the work you did now, right here in the pain, wasn't just about healing, it was about becoming ready. So if you've been sitting in that heartbreak, feeling like you'll never fully get over them, like something inside you broke that can't be fixed, I want you to hear this: you are not broken. You are rebuilding. and the pain you're feeling right now, it's not proof that you've lost something irreplaceable. It's proof that you had the courage to care deeply, that you showed up, that you gave something real, and now you get to do something even more powerful. You get to show up for yourself. You don't need to wait for their apology, their explanation, or some perfect closure moment to move forward. You don't need to make yourself smaller just to keep people who were never meant to stay. You don't need to keep reliving a love that wasn't built to last. What you need is already inside you: the strength to grieve with intention, the power to reclaim your energy, the wisdom to learn the lesson, and the self-respect to never settle for less again. And if you commit to doing that work now, to choosing yourself in the middle of the mess, you won't just get over this heartbreak. You'll rise from it with clarity, confidence, and a completely different standard for what love feels like. The next chapter of your life doesn't start when someone new walks in. It starts when you finally stop waiting for someone else to save you and realize you were the hero all along. And that will change everything.